Hello everyone, my name is Blackwatch. Welcome to another episode of How to Play. If you like this series and you want to see more guides, please subscribe. I've also got lore videos that I've been doing, so get in on it. But this week's episode we're talking about Kana Fujiwara, also known as Azami. She is a defender who's really crazy, has a gadget that's absolutely nuts. It's unlike anything we've seen before in Siege, and it is the most unique addition we've seen to the roster in Rainbow for 5 years. So, she is a 2 armor, 2 speed defender. She's currently unaffiliated but was formerly a member of the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. And she has 2 primary weapons, the ACS-12 shotgun, which is Alibi and Maestro's shotgun, and the 9x19 VSN SMG. This is the Spetsnaz SMG. I prefer the ACS-12, having used them both on Azami. I do like using the SMG on Capcan. I just didn't really like it as much on Azami. I kind of enjoyed the dynamic that the shotgun brings in, but it's really a preference thing. In terms of secondary, she's only got one option, the D50, and it's very good. Use the muzzle brake, not the suppressor. And in terms of secondary gadgets, you're talking barbed wire or impact grenades. Personally prefer the impact grenades on Azami, but it's really up to you which ones you pick. It also depends on the site and all those kind of things. Unique gadget for her is the Kiba barrier. This is a kunai that she can throw. It has no arc when she throws it, it's just a straight line to wherever she's aiming, and when it impacts it creates a circular bulletproof barrier around the point of impact, so the radius will spread out from the point of impact. In that 360 arc. It's fairly quick to fully solidify. It's a gas to begin with, so you can actually see through the point of impact, and it will solidify and then become completely opaque at that point. It behaves like Legion stuff in that she doesn't have her full stock of gadgets at the start. She actually gets them as the round goes on. There's a reason for this, and we'll get to that later on, but you need to keep that in mind when you're prepping at the start of a round. There's only so much you're going to be able to do, so you want to do the most important ones that you're maybe not going to come back to ahead of time. Now, it can be destroyed with explosives or with 3 melee strikes, and it's impervious to all types of gunfire, regardless of the weapon type. If it's buck shotgun, if it's Kali sniper rifle, it doesn't matter, it's not going to do anything to it. And just as a little clarity point, Maverick isn't able to cut it, but when he uses his torch on it, it does deal damage to it and it will break. It's just that it doesn't have holes inside it as he does it. It can deploy on almost any hard surface, so it's a very versatile gadget, and it can be used in so many ways. It can be used for protection, it can be used for blocking lines of sight, it can be used for making some sites that don't have a wall in a place where you could really do with one now have a wall, basically. So a lot of scope, and it's kind of a difficult guide to do actually for me, because she is such an open operator in terms of how you can use her. There's only really so many tips I can give, because she literally can do pretty much anything that you could imagine you could do with this gadget. You can do, apart from stand on it. So still going to try and give my best breakdown, but just be warned, she is one that's going to take a little bit of input from yourself, just practicing, trying her out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. In terms of strengths, very solid loadout. I have no qualms with the loadout at all, to be honest. I think both the primary weapons she has are good. I think her secondary is very good as well, and I think her gadgets are decent. In terms of the gadget, it's one of a kind. It can address so many issues. It can make some difficult sites or some even indefensible sites actually usable. I mean, she's a literal game changer. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't hype that people are bringing up for year 7 or anything like this. She's literally just able to do things that we've never been able to do before in Siege, and it's very exciting. So, weaknesses. Easy to become absorbed in the possibilities of the gadget. I did catch myself early on in my playtime with her almost thinking too much about where I was going to put the gadget rather than actually playing the round, so it's very easy to get caught up in that because it is such a unique gadget, because it does have so many uses and so many opportunities for use. So I would say that Azami is not very good for new players. If you're fresh to the game, you're really going to want to get an understanding of the maps and the way that the maps play specifically. So not so much the layout, but how the layout is actually going to be used and abused by the enemy, because a lot of your effectiveness as an Azami is being able to cover common sightlines that people will use to deal with you or to shut down certain holds. So that really is something that you need to pick up before I think you can use her comfortably. You can still enjoy her, you still have a good time with her, but your maximum potential for Azami is going to come from a player who knows how the maps flow and knows the common spots that are going to be useful to shut down. She's also sometimes more of a hindrance to your team than a help if it's used in the wrong spots. Sometimes it can come, or it can turn what would be really good cover, like a waist-high cover, into something that's actually not that useful. It really depends on the situation and the placing. Probably the best bet for me would just be to ask, if you have teammates, just ask them where they would like to have it if you're giving them cover on site. But again, a lot of this is trying to judge based on your experience, based on the way that you play on sites, what's actually going to be useful to you. Now, the meat of the video, tips and tricks. Don't be overly keen on plug-in reinforcements. I know a lot of people saw this and immediately thought, well, I can close up any holes that they've made in a wall. This is not the optimal way to use Azami. Now, it is useful. I'm not going to pretend that you won't get some decent uses out of that particular function, but it's usually going to be late on in the round, and this is where that point about it being a Legion style gadget comes into play, because she's only going to have access to the majority of her kunais towards the end of the round, and that's where throwing it on a barricade is going to be useful, because you're able to stop them from getting in, 3 melees to get through it, or explosives. It's enough to waste enough time that you could potentially stop them from having an easy entry, or at least slow the momentum on the entry enough that you can maybe deal with those guys a bit more easily. You want to try to preempt wherever it's possible where you're actually going to put your stuff. Now, the reason you're wanting to do this is because you want to think about areas where you're going to be likely to receive unwanted fire. I mean, most fire is unwanted, but you know, maybe you like getting shot at. I don't know. I'm not going to judge your kinks, man. And you want to shut that down with barriers that are preferably unreachable. Now, a perfect example I'm thinking of is on Oregon in the basement. If you're attacking from the tower stairs down into pillar and onto site, you can actually throw a Kiba barrier at the little top of the wall that basically has the sight line from the stairs, and if you throw it at the right spot, it completely shuts down that angle from the attacker's point of view. If they have a frag, you're done, obviously, but that's one of those things that Azami is going to have to watch out for, because she is a frag magnet, so you really want to be asking your Jaegers and your Romais to be extra nice to you this Christmas season. I know we're not even close to it, but it doesn't matter, and if they'll be nice to you, you're going to survive situations a lot more if you're going to be using your barrier as a defense. But when you put it in places like that, it's going to shut down the line of sight completely. It's going to give you cover in an area that you would otherwise not have cover. The only thing you need to do is try and balance the choice of cover that you're providing for yourself with concealment that it might offer the enemy, because you never know, you could end up placing it and then you might end up be giving them a pixel angle for free. So that's another thing. You want to check if you're putting stuff down that's specifically designed to cut off the line of sight of the enemy. Try your absolute best whenever you can to either know in advance that this is a good spot, or if you have any doubts, or if it's the first time that you've used the sight line, just go to the other side, pretend you're attacker for a second, you're an attacker for a second, sorry, this is like very late when I'm recording this, and look for any pixel peaks that you've created for yourself and try to avoid them. If you're under pressure that you're not ready for, just throw out a Kiba barrier, reposition. Simple as that. Stops them from getting in, gives you enough time to run past, obscures the sight lines enough that they're hopefully not going to be able to get a quick shot on you. Problem solved. You also want to remember the other side of surfaces when you're trying to look for places to put things. When I was talking about that spot on Oregon, This will actually applies to a few other places. So the likes of Blue on what's it called? Chalet. Yeah, Blue on Chalet. You can block that stairway off almost entirely to the point where you're basically making a little castle barricade on the stairs where there isn't actually a doorway. It's very cool, but you need to be looking on the opposite side to place it. So those are the kind of things you need to look out for. Places where you can put stuff down that are maybe not on the side that you would originally place it, but you can walk on the other side and then it turns out, oh, actually there's a little ledge that I can stick the thing on so it will land at a proper angle rather than being canted and dodgy. You may want to consider using it to block drone holes. I'm personally not a big fan of this because 9 times out of 10, if it's a spot where the drone hole is going to be highly contested, it's also going to be a spot where they'll be able to get up to it and melee. This is only really going to apply in a solid way to a drone hole where there actually is a bit of distance between the entrance on their side and the exit on your side. So yeah, maybe don't do that particular one. And if your on-site cover is insufficient, create your own. Be aware that this is going to become a potential target for people and it will make the position potentially harder to peek from your perspective. You need to watch for that. It's very easy for you to turn a good angle into a bad angle by making it an angle that you can only peek by standing, but maybe it's better that way. Maybe the cover that you're wanting to use normally isn't bulletproof. All these kind of things you need to take into consideration. As I say, guys, I can't really give you the perfect answer with Azami, but I can point you in the right direction, and you just need to really pick it up on your own as you go. Use your keybuzz to dictate enemy movement in areas with safety runs. Now, a safety run is basically just a spot where if you're going on to site, it's like a default position you would move to because it's one that's maybe got more cover when you've moved in from a more exposed position. Perfect example of this is bedroom on Oregon. If you hop through the double window, 9 times out of 10 people are going to run to the right because they're going to use the cover of the bunk bed to start taking over the site essentially. If you put a Kiba barrier down there, it actually stops them from running there and it forces them to either have to push straight or push through a rotation that you've made into kids. It's a difficult situation for them, but you can corral people like that. You're essentially setting up a cattle run that is forcing them to go in the direction you want to, but the key is here, test it. Try and figure out and just store it in your mind how wide the barrier is going to be before you place it, because obviously you don't want to throw away your gadget for nothing. But if you are just testing, if you're doing casuals, you're running stuff like that, you can always check to see, and you'll have that knowledge in advance going into future rounds. If you need to, you could always use 2 barriers, but again, you want to be as efficient as you possibly can be, so it's better just to remember in advance. Remember that you can cover floors, so the way that you would use this is if there's a really common spot for buck to shoot through. So I'm thinking blue on border, it's your classic. You can then just put a couple of barriers down on the floor in advance. It means that if he shoots it up, they're not going to go through, and you're still sitting there with cover, thankfully, so your arse is not getting torn up by the buckshot. If it's an ash, you got no chance, but you know, with a buck you'll be okay. Do Mira a favour if you want to. I do like doing this for Mira, it's kind of cool. You can turn the lower part of an unreinforced wall completely bulletproof, and so the Mira, if she's setting up on an unreinforced wall because she wants to do the old crouch down and then I'll stand up to peek type strategy, you stop her legs from being vulnerable because you just chuck a little Kiba thing underneath it. But make sure you chuck it on the wall and not onto the mirror, because if you chuck it on the mirror it will actually destroy the canister, I'm pretty sure, so be careful with that. Remember that you can cover ceiling holes as well, so I was talking about preempting bucks shooting through the floor. You can also deal with the ceiling as well in that regard for sledge and for buck. You can stop them from getting your common spots that you don't want to have taken away from you. And the last one for me is that you want to be able to remove any favourable attacker covers from them. So if there's any spots that you recognise as places where attackers tend to go or tend to use to push in, and they have any covers that are like full body where you're only going to have their head exposed when they're in a fight with you, if you want to shut that down entirely, one Kiba barrier at the point where their head would be. They can no longer peek it unless they destroy it. And if they're destroying it, it gives you an early warning. You can push into them. All sorts of stuff you can do. The early warning from the destruction of the barrier is nice. I'd say it's not the primary way that you want to play with Azami, but this is still early doors, guys. This is just based off of what I've done so far with her. I feel like I've actually resonated very well with an operator for once. There's been a lot of operators in the last few years that I've not been a big fan of, but Azami I can say quite comfortably is one that I've really enjoyed playing, and I think she's going to make a huge difference to the game in the long run. I hope you enjoyed the guide. I hope it's not too vague. I hope it's included enough to at least get you up and running on Azami and give you that opportunity, or maybe some just vague ideas on how to actually experiment with her and see how she works out as an operator in the game. So, I'll see you in the next one. If you enjoyed these videos, there are more, and there's also lore videos coming out every week, along with the guides. We're getting some real momentum now, guys. I can only thank you for the support that you've given in terms of watching, liking, subscribing. So, continue to do that for me, you absolute legends. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a share, and I will catch you in the next video. Double batching you, everybody. Bye bye.